According to a TripAdvisor survey from a few years ago, 16% of travelers reported being pickpocketed or robbed while traveling internationally. The same survey said that pickpocketing is the most common crime committed against tourists in Europe, with an estimated 1.5 million reported incidents annually. And those are just the reported ones. While tourists are certainly targets, they're not the only victims. Over 400,000 pickpocketing incidents occur worldwide each and every day. Don't be them. Watch this video. You're welcome. All right, now that I've terrified you with my scary stats about pickpockets, it's also important to note that the chances are you'll be fine. There are infinitely more tourists than there are pickpocketing incidents. I'm not paranoid in general, and I overall believe in the goodness of humanity. It's kind of why I travel. But I also believe in taking precautions so that I can make sure that my trip goes off without a hitch. Here are 12 tips for how to avoid pickpocketing while traveling. You can incorporate the ones you like into your travel routine, and before long, it'll just become the way you do things. And in so doing, you will no longer be a target for pickpockets. Tip number 1 is to know the hotspots. While pickpocketing can happen anywhere, reports indicate that the particularly common pickpocket hotspots are in the European cities of Paris, Barcelona, Rome, Prague, and Madrid. In the United States, New York City sees the most pickpocketing incidents. Although it's important to be on guard in these cities, remember, pickpocketing can happen anywhere. Pickpockets particularly like crowds and touristy areas. This stands to reason. The juiciest pickpocket victims are tourists because they're unfamiliar with the territory and they're unaware of local customs and they're generally carrying more valuables. This is not to say that you should stay away from touristy areas because there's probably a reason it's touristy, as in there's something worth seeing or doing there. So in these cases, stay observant of your surroundings and practice some of the tips that I'm about to share with you. Blending in with locals and doing your best to avoid standing out as a foreigner also helps. Tip number 2, avoid crowds. Crowded scenarios to be particularly on guard for include busy markets, things like concerts or sporting events, public squares or plazas, train stations, and crowded public transportation in general. Pro tip, if you're taking public transportation, avoid rush hour if at all possible. If you're in the metro or subway, especially in a city where pickpocketing is common, and the train that pulls into the station is packed, then just wait for the next one if you have time. Your ride will not only be infinitely more comfortable, but you'll also be more likely to avoid pickpockets who prefer crowded trains. Tip number 3, know their tricks. First of all, if someone is getting a little too close for comfort, they could be targeting you for pickpocketing. This is, of course, why pickpockets love crowds, because everyone is unavoidably packed in together. But if they're standing a little too close and it's not crowded, your spidey sense should be going off. I don't usually like to get confrontational, so if this happens to me, I just move away. And if they follow me and continue to stand close, then I will turn around and look them in the eye with my best "don't mess with me" expression. That normally does the trick. But most pickpocketing is actually done in teams, often with an element of distraction. For example, somebody might pretend to drop something in front of you, and it will either stop you suddenly, or you might feel inclined to help them pick up whatever they dropped. Their accomplice will be behind you, and while you're distracted, they'll come in for the kill, maybe bumping into you so you don't realize that their hand is in your pocket. Another common and similar pickpocket trick is known as the sandwich strategy. Someone will be in front of you, perhaps getting off the train or going up an escalator, and they will suddenly stop, which will stop your forward momentum, and their accomplice behind you will bump into you, which, given the circumstances, would actually feel fairly natural. However, this bump is all they need to get whatever's in your pockets. Now that you know what to look for, tip number 4 is to know who to look for. Pickpockets will be busy looking for targets, which is not what most people are doing in public. Next time you're on public transportation, look around. Most people have their noses buried in their phones. Now, I'm not saying that you should be suspicious of someone who's not on their phone. Lord knows we could all spend a little bit less time on our phones in general. But it is the first of a few things to look for. Next up, since most pickpocket incidents happen in teams, what you're looking for are people in groups of 2 or 3 who aren't talking or interacting with each other. Instead, they're all looking at other people, ultimately looking for their next victims, and they're probably carrying bags, which will eventually be holding your stuff if you're not careful about it. Tip number 5, don't touch your pockets. I mentioned this in my episode about travel security tips, but it bears repeating here. Pickpockets have some sneaky tricks to find out where your hiding spots are. For example, they may hang out around the signs that can be in crowded touristy areas that warn people of pickpockets. If you're not thinking and you see one of these signs, you might be inclined to touch your pockets to make sure that your stuff is there, which is a clear sign to anyone who's watching you where your valuables are. Another tactic is for somebody in a team of pickpockets to shout out that they've been robbed, which will again prompt anybody in the area to touch their pockets to make sure that they too have not been robbed. Yet. Tip number 6, be unpredictable. If you have reason to believe that you're being cased by a pickpocket, do something totally different. For example, let's say you're planning on getting on a bus or train and the person behind you has been standing uncomfortably close and you have reason to believe that they might be a pickpocket. Pretend to get on the bus or train or escalator or elevator or whatever, and at the last minute, step to the side. Even if they are casing you, they would be crazy to step aside as well because that would totally give them away. But certainly if they do that, that would be your chance to either confront them or simply situate yourself somewhere else where you feel safer. Speaking of safety, tip number 7 is to place yourself strategically. There are certain ways and places that you can stand in public that will make you more or less of a target. For example, wherever possible, stand with your back to a wall. Not only will this enable you to be observant of your entire surroundings, but it also reduces the chances of someone being able to get behind you or bump into you in a way that would be easy for them to pickpocket you. Also, if you're on the metro or subway, don't stand near the door. This makes it very easy for someone to bump into you under the guise of trying to get off the train, and in so doing to take whatever's in your pockets with them in their very well-designed quick getaway. Tip number 8, watch out at kiosks and ATMs. I have another episode entirely all about classic mistakes that people make at ATMs, but there's one additional mistake that I didn't mention in that episode, and that is to be extra aware of your surroundings when you choose an ATM and while you're using one. Ideally, you're already using an ATM that's either inside or beside a bank, which has additional security like cameras and sometimes even security guards, which will inherently reduce the chances of you being pickpocketed in those places. But beyond that, always cover up your hand as you enter in your PIN. Somebody could be looking over your shoulder or even watching you from a distance with binoculars. If they can see you enter your PIN, it could be the first step of a multi-step approach. Once they have your PIN number, if they then pickpocket you and steal your wallet with your debit card, they can drain your account. Also, if you're at a kiosk of any kind, for example, checking in at the airport or buying a Metro card at a station, you're naturally distracted with that process. This leaves you additionally vulnerable to pickpocketing. So make sure you're extra aware of your surroundings. Now, I saw a video about pickpocketing that suggested that viewers be suspicious of anyone who might come up and offer to help you while you are, for example, using one of these kiosks. This makes me a little bit sad because part of the point of travel is connecting with people along the way, and in some cases, accepting the help of strangers who might legitimately want to be of assistance. To treat anyone who approaches you about anything with suspicion just feels like a really unfortunate way of being. When I went to Japan, I had to get a bus ticket from the airport to one of the major train stations. I researched this in advance and I knew that it was possible to buy the ticket at the airport. However, when I got there, the kiosk had no option to make a purchase in English and I was completely lost. A wonderful soul saw that I was struggling and came up to help me. I walked away with a bus ticket in hand and a very warm first impression of Japan. Now, I would be lying if I said that I wasn't uber aware in that moment of the possibility that he might have had nefarious intentions, and I made sure that I was extra aware of my surroundings. For example, to make sure that he didn't perhaps have an accomplice who might come up from behind or come up from the side while he was helping me and pickpocket me or take one of my bags. Also, I wouldn't have handed him my payment card, obviously, or I wouldn't have done anything that would have made it easy for him to rob me. I guess this is all a way of saying that there's a balance between being careful when you're unfamiliar with your surroundings and allowing some of the magic of travel to just unfold. Like I said at the start of this episode, once you understand the additional risks that come with travel and being in a foreign environment, you can create habits that will become natural and that will keep you and your stuff secure on the road and off it. Okay, a few tips about prevention. Tip number 9, don't carry your cash in one place. If you do get pickpocketed, don't let them get all your money. By carrying cash in a few different places on your body or in your bags, then at least if you do get pickpocketed, you will have some additional cash and or cards to help you recover from this theft. I have another episode featuring crazy ways to hide cash while you travel. Although some of those methods are a bit ridiculous for my liking, The principle of hiding cash and some of the methods that I show in that video will help you create very good travel habits. Tip number 10, consider anti-theft bags and clothes. I'm a huge fan of Pacsafe, anti-theft bags, slings, purses, wallets, backpacks, luggage, and more. I've been a personal customer of them for well over a decade, and I continue to use some of the stuff that I originally got, as well as new stuff that they come out with each year because I like to stay on top of the newest and best anti-theft features and secure travel belongings. But Pacsafe isn't the only game in town. Companies like ScottyVest have clothing with gazillions of pockets that zip up, and some of which are ingeniously hidden so you can keep your valuables with you while you're out and about. Also, there are companies that specifically design pickpocket-proof clothing with pockets that can be additionally difficult to get into. I wrote a whole article on my website about anti-theft gear that I recommend you check out if you're interested in learning a little bit more about things that you can use while you're traveling to reduce the chances of being pickpocketed. I'll leave a link to that in the description. Even companies that don't specifically design travel clothing often have hidden pockets that could be really handy on the road. So whenever you get something new for travel, keep an eye out for some of these features. Tip number 11, zip it up. If you are somewhere where you feel pretty comfortable about your surroundings, you may unwittingly leave yourself open to unnecessary theft or even just plain loss. Ideally, if you have pockets, they can somehow be closed, and get in the habit of keeping them closed all the time. Also, it's a common myth that keeping your stuff in an inner pocket is 100% secure. Some of the pickpocket strategies that involve bumping into you can create just enough commotion that you won't realize they're taking stuff from your inner pockets. Remember, these people are pros. They know where people keep their stuff and how to get it. Tip number 12, get loud. If all of my tips thus far have been unsuccessful and you do find yourself being pickpocketed, if you catch them in the act, there is still time. Get really loud right away. Pickpocketing is not generally a violent crime. Their whole MO is to be invisible and for their crime to go undetected. If they're good, you won't even know it happened until they're long gone. They don't want to be seen or caught. So, if you catch them in the act, get loud and publicly confront your perpetrator. This may force them to abort the mission and try to make a clean getaway without your stuff. Have you ever been pickpocketed? Please share your experience in the comments so we can all learn together and learn how to travel smart in style. I'm Nora Dunn, aka the Professional Hobo, and I'll catch you next time.